Hello and welcome to another video on Warrior Cats and Ecology. Today's topic is on how cats interact with non-prey animals. I will say before we get going, parts of this video might feel all over the place. That's because a lot of the sources for this video talked about 3 or more animals interacting, not just cats and one other, and I tried to keep as much together as I could. And that being said, once again, this is for a college project, so all sources will be displayed on screen, in the credits at the end, and in the description. Part 1. What is interspecific competition? Interspecific competition can be a lot of things. It's different species competing for resources like food and space. A lot of the time, it's larger predators dominating smaller ones. It's things like killing, harassing, or stealing from other species. To talk about warriors, we're really only talking about carnivores, and in particular, mostly smaller carnivores called mesopredators. That's where cats would be classified in most cases. Top or apex predators, or even larger mesopredators, can influence smaller carnivores by predation, causing fear, and indirect competition. Intraguild predation is the term for when carnivores will prey on other carnivores. It's when a species kills something of another species in the same guild and consumes it, a guild being like all carnivores. Interspecific competition as a whole is mostly just in predators, because they're more built for killing. Lethal interactions are common between felids, canids, and mustelids, for example, and the chance increases the more their diets overlap. Interspecific killing is similar to intraguild predation. It's where a species will kill another species, but won't eat it. It's less, I need to kill to survive, and more, if this guy survives, he'll take what's mine, and if he does that, I might not survive. To combat this, but not each other directly, most creatures will avoid each other by space and time. Often, subordinate carnivores will avoid places scent marked by a dominant animal, sometimes for a few hours or up to a few weeks. An example of avoidance is cheetahs, who will avoid places that have a lot of prey because there's a good chance the area will also have lions and hyenas nearby. Besides the obvious issue of interspecific killing, a big issue for species interaction is disease transmission. Rabies, for example, is a pretty common issue that can spread between a lot of species, including humans. Another thing is that the abundance of certain animals isn't necessarily correlated to interactions between carnivores. They could be practicing spatial and temporal avoidance, or they could be attracted to each other, like hybridization. It really depends on a particular species' behavior. And animals are more likely to get in each other's way around urbanization. There's usually a lot of resources, and carnivores may be busier avoiding humans than they are each other. One issue researchers have with interspecific competition is that we can't always be sure how animals are interacting. The only way to really know is to always be watching an individual, but we can't do that very easily, so most studies are done with trail cams, radio collars, or transects, where researchers will walk certain paths and record what they see. Here's a quick case study. Some researchers wanted to find out about avoiding risk while foraging for food using stoats, or ermines, a species of weasel. The reason I'm talking about them on their own is because while cats were in the study, stoats were really the focus. They were set up in a space where they had 2 cages on either side of the room, one that was empty, and one that either had a cat or a ferret. Both of them are bigger than stoats. All 3 of them are problem species in New Zealand, where the study took place. Near each cage was some food. They found that the stoats avoided eating from the food near the caged larger carnivore until they were out of food at the empty cage. And instead of being aggressive, they were submissive and on guard. Twice during the study, the cat tried to catch stoats that got too close, implying in the wild the 2 species probably would have lethal interactions. One last term is the idea of mesopredator release. It's the idea that if you get rid of apex predators, you free up space for the mesopredators to thrive. It's mostly brought on by habitat transformations or human control, and of course, results vary. In one study, it was found that control methods for dingoes in Australia didn't do enough to greatly affect mesopredator populations of red fox and feral cat. They didn't completely eliminate them and free up the niche. Part 2. A quick look at the books. So, what's in warriors that I'm counting as a non-prey species that they interact with? First, let's mention that the cats, with a couple of exceptions like Millie-speaking dog or Midnight, can't communicate with other species. It's every species for themselves. And just because I'm putting a species here doesn't exclude it from being prey too, actually. But it's anything that threatens the cats as a competitor. Here's the main list of what the rest of this video will be looking at. 1. Mountain lion. There's only one instance of mountain lions in warriors, and our first taste of not being sure if we're in the UK or the US. To mountain lions, the cats are viewed solely as prey. 2. Badger and fox. These are the main non-cat antagonists throughout the series. There's always talk of foxes and badgers causing issues. In particular, there's a lot of talk of interspecific killing. Sometimes it's a case of Intraguild predation, too. 3. Eagles and hawks. These are cases of Intraguild predation. There's only a handful in the books, and they're always swooping down to take a cat. 4. Beavers and rats. These are a bit of odd cases. Beavers, as a one-off animal, who are herbivores, it's not even a predator. Rats, most people would think of as cat prey, but not in Warriors they usually aren't. Both of these animals are on this list because at some point or another they cause the death of a cat. These are the wildcard interspecific killing. With this cast of characters, let's discuss each group. Part 3. Warriors in real life. Alright, we're actually going to move backwards in that list I just gave from least to most threatening to the cats. And first I need to address eagles and hawks. I could not find, despite all the sources for this video, anything specifically on interspecies interaction with carnivores by raptors. We've all probably heard it though that big eagles can and will carry away all kinds of big prey, and it's somewhat true. Remember, an eagle has to be able to fly holding big prey, but that won't stop them from an easy to catch looking cat if the eagle's big enough. There's a handful of instances of birds taking away cats in the books. Snow Kid is taken by a hawk in A Dangerous Path, and Swoop of Chestnut Hawk, perhaps an ironic name, is carried off by an eagle during a visit to the tribe in Sign of the Moon. On the other hand, Tall Tale manages to kill a hawk that was going after kits in Tall Star's Revenge. So, beavers. There's both an American and a European beaver, but it probably doesn't matter which one's in this book. Regardless, they're big rodents that are strong enough to drown predators like dogs and wolves. Really, only wolves will be consistently able to affect beaver populations, given their size, even if they potentially have many large predators. The bigger threat of beavers to the clan cats wasn't so much getting attacked, but the danger the dam was to the lake. Beaver dams can have a lot of effects on ecosystems downstream, and there's a lot of factors to it. Things like how the dam was built and how the waterway itself changes year to year and season to season. There's only one case of beavers and warriors, and it's a problem because it causes the lake to dry up downstream. They don't seem to really mind the cats until the cats attempt to remove the dam. During the battle, Rippletail receives a massive bite and later dies from the wound. At no point do the beavers retreat or attempt to drown the cats like they would probably do in real life. Instead, they rear up and try to bite. Next, admittedly my favorite topic in this video, rats. Domestic rats are some of the sweetest little creatures. They're soft and intelligent, they're like little dogs. Perhaps the fact that they're like little dogs is part of what makes this so funny to me. In Warriors, rats kill Bluestar in the very first book. In a huge swarm the cats can't fend off. The very first leader we are introduced to. At the time strong and noble Bluestar loses her 7th life to a swarm of rats. Not only this, I had forgotten until research that rats caused the original SkyClan to disband. In Firestar's quest, the rats also attack SkyClan again, killing a warrior, killing Firestar once, and injuring another warrior. Rats and warriors are absolutely brutal and for some reason always seem to swarm. They're only said to be dangerous by the Ultimate Guide in a swarm or if they are carrying disease. There's only one case recorded on the Warriors wiki page for prey of cats eating rats. On the rat page of the Warriors wiki, it mentions rats are generally not hunted because they carry disease. So, real rats and cats. First of all, there's 2 species of rats, black rats and brown, or often called Norway rats. Domestic rats are a subspecies of brown rats, for the record. A study of brown rats and cats in Baltimore alleys from 1980 to 1982 found cats and rats actually were generally very peaceful coexisting with each other. And when someone started acting up, it was never the rats starting to act aggressive to the cats. When cats did go after rats, it was almost always younger rats by weight. It might be that absolute body size is the concern for cats. It seemed that around the 75-gram mark, cats started to second guess if they really wanted to go for the rat. The study also found that cats would probably more likely hunt rats if they were exposed to rat hunting early on. Maybe that makes sense for warriors too, that if the cats don't grow up hunting rats, they won't as adults. Research has actually been going on for decades in Baltimore alleys, and another study from 2006 to 2008 found that despite both researchers trapping rats to get their average weight and cats killing rats, the population was pretty stable. While the researchers trapped a lot of all-sized rats, including big fellas, cat predation was almost exclusively on little fellas. Taking this into account, it's likely warriors would only go for small rats if they grew up hunting rats, but in real life, disease and swarms are probably not a concern. Next, into the fellow mesopredators. First up, badgers. There's two species of badgers that we could be talking about in warriors. You would think with books taking place originally in the UK we would have European badgers, but most depictions seem to be American badgers. Go figure. They're also mainly nocturnal. Of course, the most notable event with the badgers is the attack on ThunderClan in Twilight after badgers were driven out of RiverClan and ThunderClan territories. I guess good on them that by the time it's the badger attack, it's around nightfall for mostly nocturnal badgers. The most notable badger is Midnight, who shows up a lot, speaks cat, and is actually a ghost who has apparently been around for decades. In a study featuring badgers in Italy watched by camera to see who was sharing their dens, it found that actually a lot of animals will share dens with badgers. Sometimes foxes will live in and rear young in a badger set, and in the study there were no aggressive interactions, even though badgers have been known to sometimes prey on fox cubs. Even cottontail rabbits, who could make easy prey for badgers, were found to have nested in badger sets. There were no feral cats in this study, but a lot of other animals we're not talking about, like crested porcupines and pine martens, also shared sets with badgers. Talking about disease transmission, a study in Finland found that badgers might easily give rabies to other badgers or tanukis in the area, thanks to their big home ranges. Cats were in this study, but they didn't really favor the same areas as badgers. Additionally, while this study featured tanuki, red fox, European badger, and domestic cat, it couldn't really tell us how they were interacting because they were being tracked by radio collar. Researchers could only tell where they were, not really what they were doing. Foxes. They're a big issue in warriors. There's a lot of instances of them just being in the way, being smelled or sighted, or starting a fight all over the series. In a case of several species interacting, Midnight calls off some foxes in Moonrise from attacking the clan cats, because she can speak fox too. As for real life, going back to that study about badgers and rabies, turns out red foxes are a big carrier of rabies in northern Europe. It's possible that dispersal of the subadults in late winter could also increase the chances of mesopredators running into foxes. A study on space use of foxes, dogs, and cats in Poland found all three of them to be more active at night, so they had some temporal overlap. Making up for this, they had less spatial overlap. The presence of dogs had a strong negative effect on the presence of cats and foxes. This study provided no evidence that cats and foxes avoid each other, but it did mention foxes have been known to go after cats. A study of the mesopredator release of foxes and feral cats from dingoes in Australia, followed by the controlling of foxes to somewhat release cats, mentioned that it had no indication of Intraguild predation, but it noticed the presence of fox affected cat space use. After some foxes were removed, cats changed their diet, range size, and habitat use. It was likely cats might have had a bigger response had foxes been completely removed. These animals had a high prey overlap, but they might have survived fine together by eating different amounts of different sizes of the same thing, like foxes eating more adult rabbits and cats eating more young rabbits. Lastly, in Hollyleaf's story, there is an interesting narrative with foxes. Hollyleaf rescues a fox cub being chased by a dog, only to later find the fox again when it attacks her because he doesn't recognize her. Later on, she saves some ThunderClan apprentices from a fox, possibly the same one she had saved. I'm not sure how much I agree with this idea of a fox going after Hollyleaf right after he had made a kill, seeing as it would have been too much energy wasted to chase her down as prey too, but it does cement the view in Warriors that foxes are always capable of Intraguild predation. On to some of the big ones. Let's talk about mountain lions, and by extension, lynx and bobcat. There's only one interaction with another Felid in Warriors, and it's the Sharptooth, the mountain lion in Moonrise. It harasses the tribe and treats them only as prey, not competition. So, what about wild Felid interactions? Well, when it comes to warriors, it might be more likely they'd run into a bobcat, seeing as bobcats are more likely to occur in fragmented urban areas than a puma. Not only that, but carnivores have been known to sometimes use human trails and dirt roads because they're easy to walk along, and there happens to be an abandoned thunderpath leading right up into ThunderClan's camp. Now, about some dangerous interactions between everyone. Would mountain lions kill cats? Further, would they eat cats? One study found 2 bobcat fatalities at deer carcass sites, probably indicating interspecific killing. It didn't seem they were killed to be eaten, just for being in the way. Puma will eat smaller carnivores though, and one study analyzing puma eating jaguarundi, a species of Central and South American wildcat, and the puma's closest relative, mentioned puma ate a whole host of smaller felids. The paper pointed out that due to the different feeding habits in puma and jaguarundi, it was probably killing for feeding purposes, and not just in response to competition. A study in California and Colorado was done to assess the transmission of Bartonella, FIV, and toxoplasmosis between puma, bobcat, and domestic cat. Bartonella and toxoplasmosis are zoonotic, which means they can also transfer from animals to humans. Bartonella is mostly from fleas, toxoplasmosis from the environment, and FIV from direct contact, usually fighting. It found more toxoplasmosis between pumas, and more Bartonella between domestic cats. Because FIV has more specialized strains, it wasn't really going between the species as much as it was going through all the same species. Bringing together Intraguild predation and disease transmission, let's talk about the close relatives of bobcats, Iberian lynx. There's small populations of these guys in Spain that are of concern because they're at major risk of a disease outbreak. Lynx have been known to sometimes prey on cats, and they can be at risk of disease spread that way. We don't have to be monitoring cats 24/7 when a disease like FIV shows up, because we know FIV means they had to have direct contact. A study of their interactions with other carnivores showed that they had no aggressive interactions with badgers, but have been reported to eat red fox. They're closer to a mountain lion than a domestic cat, that's for sure. Throwing a bonus animal into the ranks, dogs, and by extension, coyotes, and dingoes. There's no coyotes or dingoes in Warriors, one of them for good reason because it's pretty region specific, but we do have some run-ins with dogs. I didn't really want to include them in the main categories because there aren't really ever feral dogs the cats deal with to the extent of badgers and foxes, and they're not wildlife like beavers. But there's a very memorable feral dog pack and a dangerous path. There's also a handful of run-ins with dogs that don't have owners, like in Tall Star's Revenge. Every time a dog shows up, they want to hurt cats. It's always pack, kill with them. Most dingo control is done because dingoes are a problem for livestock, and in turn it can affect mesopredators and prey, by mesopredators also eating the bait, or complete removal causing mesopredator release. This is more of a case of human interaction and the impacts from that on animals. A study of dogs and cats in the Serengeti ecosystem of Africa observed only a few interactions between cats and wildlife, instead more by dogs. It found some places that large carnivores would eat dogs, and in places bodies weren't disposed of properly, sometimes scavengers would too. Smaller carnivores would interact with dogs rather frequently though. To talk about coyotes, let's bring several things back together for a study done in California. This study was on mesopredators and their reactions to large carnivores and human development. It found that, yeah, puma and coyote activity was associated with mesopredator activity. Coyotes and raccoons were most negatively associated with puma, while bobcats, gray fox, and striped skunks were detected more often at sites with puma activity. Either this was because they were able to avoid confrontation with pumas, or they benefited from being around puma because they were less around coyote and raccoon. On the other hand, there were less opossum and gray fox around coyotes. Bobcats were also more likely to be detected with coyote activity. For whatever reason, this study found bobcats weren't specifically trying to avoid pumas either. And where do cats fit in? Well, it's actually difficult to say. They were detected in the study, but their rates of occurrence might have been skewed because they don't all have proper predator avoidance. Instead, a lot of avoidance might be based on experience. Assuming a cat learns, maybe I shouldn't be where I can smell coyote, and lives to think it again. That's all for this video. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you all again in the next installment.